I'm saying nothing. My lips are staying like the zipper on the Slitheen. Now there's going to be I'm going to have a problem with you now. Slitheen. I'm going to have a problem saying it, aren't I? Here we go. Slitheen.
It's the thing. It's the Slitheen.
I got a problem here. I can't say it. I'm going to literally have to get through this recording without talking about them directly.
Someone throw a jar of pickled eggs at him.
God, I haven't even had a drink.
Hello and welcome to Talking About. We are 4 weeks into Doctor Who Season 1, Series 1, whatever you want to call it, with Chrissy Eck and Billy P. I am Paul P-Bal. Don't forget, you can like this, you can subscribe to this, you can comment below, you can do all of that, and we will love you for it. I am joined, as ever, by...
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
Hey! We're all here, we're all happy. Okay, so preview. What?
Always happy.
I won't go that far. I'm usually fairly depressed. Previously on Doctor Who Season 1, the Riding High in Amsterdam favourite with us on 22 points is The Unquiet Dead, followed by Rose on 20 and End of the World on 18.5. Will today's endeavour go higher, higher, or lower, lower, as they might once have said for Bruce Forsyth?
Yeah, I used to love Play Your Cards Right. I used to love that series. Loved it.
And Jason always goes lower, lower.
Rude.
Certainly not going higher, is he? Today's story, therefore, excitingly, is Doctor Who and the Aliens of London. Or, I mean, if you're going to combine it, Doctor Who and the World War III. Because it's one story, we are doing it as one cohesive, beautiful production. And I'm guessing, as James started last time, Jason's going to have a very informative introduction for us this time.
Well, indeed, I am. And I think it's a great idea that we're doing this as one combined episode, because it makes sense with a two-part story, doesn't it? Right, okay, so here we go. We've got Aliens of London and back to modern day Earth, and we have Jackie back in the storyline, but more importantly, we've got an epic start to this one, which I think is one of the model shots that stands out for me from this first series, where you've sort of got the alien craft sweeping in and smashing through Big Ben, just to sort of make its announcement known that we have aliens somewhere attacking Earth.
Hang on a second. You mean in London?
Well, yes, but, I didn't want to...
What, and a potential World War III?
Well, I'm edging my bets here, with this intro.
You can almost feel that he's not written this intro in advance, can't you? You can almost just feel maybe it's winging more than the Slitheen ship when it hits.
Well, I wouldn't like to be over-prepared for these things, you see. It's nice to just come in and, not tick off the list there. I'd like to, I like to just, roll with the punches a little bit with these.
I think James might punch you in a minute. I can feel it building.
Sorry, I couldn't resist it.
Sorry, I'm saying nothing. I am saying nothing.
Oh, here we go. There are a number of firsts in this story, but I'll let James tell you about those. But the most important thing for me is the hospital that is seen in this, or the mortuary in the hospital that is seen in this story, is in actual fact my doctor's surgery in Cardiff. There you go. Fascinating fact there to start us off.
That's the most important thing about this story to you, that it's where you go and get your prescriptions.
No, it's not. But I just, I'm just...
The things they must have seen in that surgery.
Don't you dare.
Every time in Torchwood to sort them out, I bet.
Yeah. Oh, no, don't be talking about zips, James, whatever you do.
Every time he went in, zip.
Oh, and of course, we've got to mention Harriet Jones, by the way. Just put it out there.
Oh,
And I'm desperately not trying to mention the aliens because, quite honestly, I'm going to get that wrong. The other thing I would add.
That's literally the most chaotic introduction I think we have had in however many years of doing this.
But I kind of like this chaoticness. I kind of, I'm kind of just going with this.
It's just like, oh yeah, and it's got pig in it.
There's a title sequence. There was a title sequence for both episodes, I think, and there's a cliffhanger. I must say, there's a cliffhanger. I mean, I know we were talking about Bruce Forsyth before, but it's not like the conveyor belt generation game. You've not got to just remember things from the 2 episodes. You've got 2 minutes, Jason, to tell us everything you can remember from those 2 episodes. Go!
Cuddly toy.
Fondue. There was a fondue set, I'm sure.
At least it'll be a memorable intro to one of our videos.
Yeah. Shall I go now?
Go on, James. You've always got something prepared for us there.
No, this. I know you mentioned the crash, which was at the time, that was the eye-catching thing, wasn't it, from the trailer? And I remember there being a documentary about how they made it and the sort of sequence, and they filmed it the wrong way round and then sort of flipped it so it looked like it was hitting the right side of Big Ben. So I remember all of that at the time. I think it was on Doctor Who Confidential as well. It was a big piece on it. For me, this story is the significance to me is that Rose comes home. It's the consequence of traveling with the Doctor, and we've talked about the sort of gradual build in the first 3 episodes. We're now on episode 4 and episode 5.
No, we're not.
And we have, apparently, we have Rose going home for the first time since she travelled with the Doctor. Although she's spoken to Jackie, and we mentioned about the timing of the call, because I think when she was on the space station, it was just before, it was out of sync. Now we have her going home, and the Doctor says, you've been gone 12 hours, and actually it's like 12 months. And you see this is where you start to see the consequences of what happens when you travel with the Doctor, and in a way that we'd not seen really before, because we didn't necessarily have the family unit that we now have under Russell T Davies. So you see the impact on, firstly, Jackie, because her daughter, who she loves, has been missing for all this time. There's a really sort of quite dark undertone in the fact that the police believe that Mickey had something to do with her disappearance, and it's dealt with really subtly. It's sort of reference, but essentially he's been accused of killing her, and Jackie has not necessarily been the one pointing the finger, but certainly goes along.
Oh, no, she has though, hasn't she? They literally say, because the neighbour comes around and say, "Oh, you owe Mickey an apology," because she's been putting things through letterboxes and stuff saying Mickey's killed her,
and and that's quite a dark thing. And then you get, again, the consequences of traveling with the Doctor, because Mickey and Jackie both end up in danger from the Slitheen later on in the story. So even just by association, they end up being in a very sort of like dangerous situation. So I think what New Who, or new series Who, does more is that we talked about seeing through the eyes of the companion. Now you're seeing through the eyes of the companion and her extended family, her boyfriend and her mum, just how dangerous it can be. And there's something really quite natural about Jackie's reaction later on in the episode, where she phones the hotline. She sees the TARDIS materialize for the first time. She realizes, even though sort of, she gives him a slap. You say you're a doctor, and he says, "Yes, I am a doctor," and gives him a slap. And you get her realization that he is an alien, and Rose potentially is in danger. So you have a lot of the sort of family dynamic and the doctor responding to that, particularly when they're like in Downing Street in the second part and they're locked in, and Jackie's like, "Can you keep her safe?" And he doesn't answer. He avoids the question because he can't guarantee that he will keep her safe. He will do everything he can, but he can't guarantee it. And I think that's a really clever line to go down. I think the aliens we'll talk about, but saying that, they've cropped up again and again because they're memorable. They're maybe not necessarily for the right reasons, but it's for me, it's the dynamics of what's happening with the relationship with the doctor, with the relationship with the family. You're right, Harriet Jones is great, but it's the rest of the story I know is it's not necessarily the main point for me.
There are undertones though, and I think you're right. You do see that effect of Rose being away, traveling for that sort of, traveling away and being away for 12 months. Nobody knows. There's that wonderful scene, as you said, where all these neighbors seem to have cropped up from nowhere, and there's some really comic bits there. But there is also that great bit of I think it's underplayed comedy going on underneath that. I don't want any family domestic problems in the. I don't want family issues in the TARDIS. It's stuff like that. And by this point, I remember watching this the first time round, and I don't know quite how happy I was at the time with having the family dynamic in there. I think it adds a dimension and an element to it, and I think it's played really well. And this is really the proper establishment of it during these 2 episodes, because obviously, it is all starting to get revealed to them, as you say. But this is where I think that sort of underplay of comedy in amongst that seriousness really, for me, cements this whole sort of family unit into the stories at this stage.
I suppose in Doctor Who and the Survival, there's the merest of throwaway things, isn't it? When Ace talks to Ange, she goes, "Didn't anyone miss me?" And she's like, "Well, we thought you died or gone to Birmingham," and it's funny because that's as much as I think you've ever had in the whole thing of anyone referencing traveling with Doctor, because essentially they tend to circumnavigate the problem, don't they, by picking up an orphan. I mean, in the nice way, Vicky, Victoria. I mean, Sarah Jane, you hear talk of her auntie, you never hear talk of Mummy and Daddy Smith. Same with Jo. I mean, you hear of her uncle getting her the job at Unit 1.
Yeah.
You don't have anyone. There isn't the domesticity, is there? I mean, Nyssa has a father. She has a dead mother, but then she has a dead father, so she's an orphan. Adrix. It's kind of, if you have a relative, it has to be an aunt. Tegan has an aunt. She doesn't have a mum and a dad, so she's not like moaning that she's got to go back to her job and her mum's got dinner on. There's no sense that anyone's got a commitment to go back to. And I think from the first episode, that Rose has got a family and she's got a mother that loves her, and that's the sort of and it's really odd. I suppose your viewpoint on it slightly changes in some ways as you get older or don't get older with it, but you can sort of see the Rose wanting to go off and have the adventure and have the excitement and live her life is it's an admirable thing, and you go, great, grab the opportunity to do that. But you also see that it's a really selfish thing, because she sort of destroys her mother in the process by putting her through a lot of horrible things, which she sort of says sorry, but then, I mean, a second she can get back up, she's off again. And it's that sort of underlying thing you get with the Rose character that makes her human, I suppose. There is a sort of, it's not I don't say it's an unpleasant selfishness, but there is an almost entitlement that she wants, and it is a good thing. She wants an adventure. She wants to go off and have it. She wants to live her life. She doesn't want to be marginalised in what she does. But you do see the cost that comes. I mean, Jackie begs her not to go. And she's obviously had 12 months of thinking Mickey's a murderer and all that sort of stuff, and the campaign thing. And it is a really powerful. Because we sort of in the last one about pre-credit sequence. It's a really powerful thing when you have that moment where he spots the poster, and then it's like, he's all cocky about you've been gone 12 hours, it's fine, and it's like 12 months. And it's got an impact because it does show that you can't just pop in the box, have larks, and be back home for tea.
But it's nice to see at this point that you start to understand the consequences. I mean, obviously, we see those consequences played out in Power of the Doctor, for example, where you've got obviously the old companions all coming together to support one another. But this was a radical departure for Doctor Who, and had mixed reactions potentially at the time, because there were some people when the series came back that weren't that comfortable with the sort of whole family element of it. But it is nice that we're exploring a dimension or a different strand here that we hadn't done, because you're right. In days gone by, Rose would have joined the TARDIS crew, and Billy would have been on board for 3 seasons, would have been dropped off somewhere to wrap the story up, and that would have been that. But the dip in and out throughout this series, throughout this season in particular, and there's more to come, and we won't spoil that, but it adds much more depth. And at the time, I was probably one of those people that probably wasn't that comfortable with it. But like I said, I kind of think that it's got a great place in the series, and added something new that we'd not had. And that was really what, another of the things that work in the reinvention of Doctor Who for this series, were these new things that were being tried and were a bit brave, but they were actually the right thing to do.
And I think Camille is brilliant in this. I think from the moment that Rose walks in and she sees her and she drops her tea, and then you have these snippets, don't you? You have these sort of like little clips of conversation, and you see the journey Jackie has gone on from sort of shock. It's almost like the change curve. She's gone from angry to denial to you see all of those emotions. And there's a wonderful moment where she says, "Where were you? Why can't you tell me?" She's begging her to say what's happened, and then later on we get the more comedy style Jackie back, when they're throwing vinegar at farting aliens. But you get to see how good Camille is as Jackie, and get to see some of her range. Probably less so with Mickey, bearing in mind everything that's happened to him. He kind of just rocks up and goes, "Oh, you're here," sort of thing. Whereas I think you really do get to see that mother-daughter bond, and how strong Jackie feels for her.
But he's almost the comedy foil, though, James. He gets that scene where he sees the TARDIS and runs up, and the TARDIS takes off, and he runs into the wall, and it's kind of, he's obviously it becomes more serious with him as we go through the series. But right now, I think he is definitely in there for comic relief.
But a lot of the comedy, again, and I sort of discussed when we talk about Rose, Noel himself does come down on that he's not pitching it. He's not doing an awful. I mean, heaven forbid, I'm not saying he was doing a terrible job here. It just feels that if it dialed back just a couple more notches, you'd be more invested in him, rather than being like, oh, it's a little bit too overtly. I'm playing this as a joke, so you don't have the pathos with him in the same way that if Jackie's doing comedy, it comes out of the character rather than being comedy. Here is a funny bit. It's like, this is how the character is. This is her humorous situation. This is how she deals with daily life. She has the phone on the go, and she has the friends in the house, and she has relationships with people that casually mention. It all comes through that. Whereas Mickey, it feels a little bit like it's played full on comedy, because you should actually feel a lot of sort of sympathy for him, that he's been having 12 months of people thinking he's a killer. Because it's that great line, isn't it? When she goes, "Was there anyone else?" She said, "Well, no, because everyone thought I murdered you." That's really funny, because it's like, so he's not saying he hasn't had anyone else just because he didn't want it. It's kind of like, yeah, no, everyone thought I was a killer. And there's the awful. I mean, it's an awfully cruel line, isn't it? Where she says the doctor's not her boyfriend. He's better than that. I mean, that's brutal in terms of saying that to your boy, and you don't get the impact with him that you should get for that, because it should be more of a, you should be feeling sorry that she's buggered off and left him, because again, it's part of the selfish Rose thing. So whereas she's like, she wants him to wait for her, not go off with anyone else, but she also doesn't want him to be. I mean, she does ask at the end, doesn't she, if she wants to come along, but
she does the same. Sorry, she does the same with Jackie in the last episode. So she talk about how the Doctor is better. She really does. She's, I wouldn't say infatuated, but she is in awe of him and the things that he does, and you get that payoff from Father's Day later on. Whereas here, she's, saying to Mickey, I can't be in this relationship really because of this happening. And I think you feel a little bit more sympathy for Mickey later on in this series. Whereas I think here, it's difficult to latch onto that because you don't necessarily see any of the emotion. Whereas with Jackie, you get it instantly the minute she walks through the door. It's all about that reaction and how she feels about Rose reappearing. And the Doctor's quite blasé about it. He just walks in and goes, "Oh, it's been 12 months," and he's still. I think P-Bal, you mentioned it on one of the other recordings about he's quite manipulative, and he's kind of like, I don't want any of this family stuff. It's like, can we go? Can we? And he goes off on his own to go and investigate, and then comes back, and Rose is like, "Where did you go?" He doesn't want to get involved too much. He's very sort of like standoffish. But then you've got that sequence where he's in the flat and all the people are coming in and out, and he's watching various different news programs and Blue Peter and things like that, where you just have all these sort of like clips of the things that are happening. So it's kind of, as soon as he can tempt her away from that, he's like, "Yeah, come on, let's go back to having an adventure."
But I get you said about the clips stuff. That's another thing that I really felt struck by watching it, is that kind of thing that it is very contemporary in terms of. I know we've had newsreader, I suppose War Machines, isn't it, as our first sort of let's have a contemporary newsreader, but this is the first sort of it's like BBC News. It's very recognisably so, a bit of Blue Peter, and it's funny to see that, and it does ram it home to it being modern day. The interesting thing I thought made it even more contemporary for us now is that they said they've got a missing government who are ineffectual and not responding to the crisis. And there was just part of me thinking, "Oh my God, is this past 18 months has there been some kind of alien incursion and we've just not known about it?"
Go into the cupboard and there's a Liz Truss.
If Rishi farts, I'm panicking. Let's just put it that way.
I mean, could you imagine if aliens had replaced Liz Truss? How would we have known? Anyway,
but it was because it was one of my sort of fact things is that Russell T Davies had to go to the BBC to say, "Can we put this out?" Because it was about the same time as the general election back in 2005. Although the story itself is set in 2006, because you've got the 12-month gap between Rose left in contemporary Earth, and now it's a year into the future. So there is he wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to break any sort of rules around the election and having something political, because they'd asked someone originally who looked like they wanted a Tony Blair lookalike to be the dead prime minister, and Harriet Jones talks about being one of the babes, which was one of the Blair babes. So they wanted to insinuate that it was Tony Blair that had been killed off as the prime minister, but they didn't go down that route. In the end, the only reference is her saying that she's a Blair babe. She says, "I'm one of the babes."
As Cherie's dad, and it made it a little bit more linked, couldn't we? Tony Booth. Anyway, no. It's interesting because we've talked a lot about, I suppose, we do now about the family setup and the family characters. But it's interesting that there's a whole sort of storyline, the whole alien invasion. Well, it's not even an invasion, is it? They want to sell it off for powering, because there's a global economic crisis out in space. They want to sell off a cheap fuel, and they're like Costco.
Predicting 15 years later, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't cheap fuel. Oh, I
think this. I was going to say, I think this story, when it first aired, was the first time I was probably starting to doubt whether or not this was going to go in the right direction, because the comedy in this around the aliens, the Slezine. See, I can't get this word out as much. I'm trying. However, behave. It's the whole concept of farting aliens and pigs in spacesuits running around a hospital, and it brought back sort of some of the things I didn't like about some of the latter years in the classic, where I thought the series was getting a little bit too silly. And my concern at the time watching this as it went out for the first time was, hello, hang on a second, is this a turning point, or is this a direction that this is going to go in, where your aliens are going to be that little bit more comic, or and there was that sort of seed of doubt that was planted initially, although when they return again further on down the line, I was probably more comfortable with them. But I don't know, it was just, there was sort of a little bit of a warning bell went off that, were we going to go down too much of a comedy route?
The space pig, though, I don't think is a comedy thing. I think it's a really sad and quite an awful thing, isn't it? Because it shows up different things, doesn't it? Because they've grafted a baby pig into a spacesuit, haven't they? And then they've scared it shitless on a spaceship, and then it's been shot. So it's had the most awful time in the run.
Yeah, I mean, it's in there for the diversion, isn't it? I mean, that's the diversion of their attack, and it sort of takes all the emphasis away from them. That bit, I agree that it's horrific in the way that it's being portrayed. But from a visual concept, it jarred for me.
But it's quite a striking visual, and it does have a reasoned explanation at the end that they're just, doing the sort of the showground kind of diversionary thing, that they've grafted this together to appeal to what a human might think that an alien looks like, rather than what an alien does look like. And
it got its own doll.
I know what. So, don't action figure for this one. No, Jack, and no, anyway, don't. It's a trigger point. I watched this with Dexter, and he pointed out it actually has a little bit more of a Sarah Jane Adventures vibe to it, which I think is a very fair comment. I said you could sort of imagine Harriet's character being Sarah Jane, because Sarah Jane would be undercover and in on the story, so I can sort of see how that would work. I know a lot of Doctor Who fans at the time were not struck on this one not being an entirely. I think it does. It is a childlike sense of humour, the farting, but I don't find it offensive, because actually, interestingly, I saw again in relation to this, they're on the DVD. I now watch the Blu-ray. One of the extras is a Chris Eccleston BBC News interview. And he says, I'm not going to convert the John Pertwee and the Tom Baker fans, and I don't mind that, but I want all the children from 8 to 12 to take me as their doctor.
Yeah.
So 8 to 12, I think that makes sense if you watch, and actually it's quite a brutal thing. I mean, they're quite horrific, and there's some sort of gruesome scenes of the ripped off heads and stuff, and the skins and things are horrible. So I don't know whether the farting slightly offsets it. And if you're at school and someone drops a trump or something, you can be like, "Oh, you're a slithy." I don't know whether is that something that plays in that kind of remit of it being identifiable for the kids and funny for the children.
I think so. And you get this series, particularly. I remember when this was airing, and I had a similar thought to yourself, Jason, around the sort of farting aliens. I know originally they planned for them to be a little bit more vicious, a bit like the sort of Family of Blood later on. It was, they were going to be these hunters that went by scent and killed off loads of people. I think what this series does is it allows children's imagination, and certainly later on we will get to stories where there were certain catchphrases, for example, that every kid was saying in the playground after watching the episode. We haven't got to Dalek yet, so we haven't sort of started to establish some of the more classic aliens. We've had, burping bins, we've had Charles Dickens and ghosts, and we've had lots of weird and funky aliens from the future, and now we've got another one that's been introduced. And I think you're right. I think that the farting is an accessible point. If you just said, right, we're going to put this out on a Saturday evening for the kids, and there's going to be a load of aliens killing off people and then taking their skins and hiding inside them, then probably some of the BBC would have been like, oh my god. But they've kind of made it accessible, as an adult I can watch it and go, right, yeah, okay, these are quite ruthless creatures. Maybe they don't come across that ruthless, but that's where the plan was. But they've made it more accessible to children by having them fart. And I think you're right. If you think about the 8 to 12-year-olds, there would have been something quite funny about that. And there are moments in this series and in the next one as well, where you can imagine that on the Monday morning, the kids would be talking about it at school. They would be saying the catchphrases. They would be acting out, unzipping their forehead or whatever else, because that's what, the kids' imagination takes over. So I think from that point of view, yes, great to get new audience in. Older perspective, probably, okay, it's a bit different.
They did do a free whoopee cushion with Doctor Who Adventures magazine, didn't they? So the whoopee cushion. One that is not my anecdote, but I do love that Annette Badland, who we love and adore here. We love Annette. She said that she used to, when she see kids staring at her in the supermarket, would just do that and they go because they're scared shitless. I like to think of that. Just you shop and you could just terrify some poor child. I think again, I like all the guest performances. I think again, Annette is. I love her in this, but it's great that she gets the second later on. I mean, we don't know that yet. Spoiler alert! But you can see that's they've picked, and it could have been any of them, really.
And then you've got Penelope Wilton, who apparently, because she'd worked with Russell T Davies before, he wrote the part for her, and I think there is, she's NP for Fly Down North, and that becomes the ongoing gag through lots of episodes. I've just been watching the sort of the Christmas one, and she's Prime Minister, and then you get former Prime Minister, and the whole yes, we know who you are. But I think there is something so British about her. It's just like this wonderful character whose heart is in the right place. She just wants to help people. She goes and gets someone a cup of coffee, and although people get irritated with her, she just wants to help. And I think there is, from this episode, you can see why she became a recurring character, because there was something eminently likable about her, but also something very human about her. So later on, as the character develops, you kind of understand why she's done the things that she did, and she provides this sort of later on, and I will talk about this, I'm skipping ahead quite a bit, but she provides this counterpoint to the Doctor later on as a sort of human authority figure versus the Doctor.
Spoiler.
I know.
It's also a sort of important part of the power of the guest stars that they're getting through here. So we've had Zoe Wanacre, Simon Callow even. Simon Cowell would probably look like Lady Cassandra these days. And Penelope Wilton. So it's a thing that obviously people are wanting to be. They're glad to have it, and it's attracting star names, but not, I would say, in a gratuitous way. I think they're all playing parts. Navin Chowdhury is, I think, slightly. I mean, I feel slightly that he's wasted in some ways in this because he's a really good actor, and it's not a bad. I mean, it's not a bad part. I think, but it just feels a bit of a shame that he's not got more to do, or that he doesn't survive getting killed by the Slovene. It just seems a bit of a. He could have come back, or I don't know. Maybe that's just my casting choices there. But interestingly, I was sort of watching this, and I was thinking there are so many sort of guest parts in this that are part. I mean, we have discussed this, I think, quite a bit here, but there are guest parts which are parts and they're characters. And if you said they were this part in this story, you go, oh, okay, yeah, no, he's the soldier who does this, or he's the policeman that does this, and you'd know who the parts were. And I think that's another thing that's, as the show's gone on in its new incarnation, that's sort of been lost. This thing of I'm a guest part in this story. I'm this, and I get 2 lines, and then I die, but you don't know who I am or care. I think there's a lot you can see in Sarah, even the sort of the individual Slovenes. Like there's joking after because Eric Potts, bless him, he's in the first one, and he swaps out, doesn't he? And she's like, he's like, oh, I enjoy being him because he got a wife, a mistress, and a young farmhand or something like that. Yeah. But you then, it's just strokes of character, isn't it? You go, oh, of course, well, he's, you think, well, you know where he's at, and you know what his life is, but it's a line, and it sort of becomes a character, and it becomes a personality that's really important to making you engage with it as a drama, I think.
And you've got, I mean, going back to what you were saying about bringing in the contemporary, you've got that whole sort of extended sequence where you've got Andrew Marr doing a broadcast outside Downing Street, who's going, that's the Minister for Fishing. That's and you've got these sort of like really obscure ministerial names, or that's the president of the so and so boat club. No idea why he would be here. And I think Russell's writing sometimes just hits upon absolute genius. It's very much of its day. You can almost imagine that during whenever there's a big, I mean, God knows, over the last couple of months they've been pretty much outside 10 Downing Street all the time, literally going, oh, here comes the cat walking in, and here comes the policeman walking in, because there's nothing else really to sort of talk about. So I think it encapsulates that in a really, really sort of funny but natural way. I think that's great.
The Slovene themselves, in their green monster form, they have they work in mixed ways. Sometimes I think they work better as a physical prop or physical costume, I suppose, than they do in some of the CGI hasn't aged terribly well on some, especially I think when you see them coming out of the bodies, it's a bit more kind of like which isn't, they're not always not, I think it hasn't aged quite as well as you'd hope it to, but I suppose it's a big ask to imagine the visualization of them coming out of the skins to an extent without just doing sort of tomb ripping or something.
The visual effects jar though slightly, because the real life monster costume is it is almost a little bit, it's almost a little bit of a, I don't know, it feels more real than that CGI when they're running, and it's clearly not quite the same as the actors inside the costume. It does jar, but again, I think you're right. The effects back in the day, we were raving over the effects in 2005. These were quite groundbreaking for us, and if you look back at them now, sort of 17 years on, it is a little bit of a different story, isn't it?
I think where they use just the Slovene arm, I think that's really effective. The arm comes out and pins him up on the wall and kills him. I think that works. I think the CGI of them running around Downing Street looks like a gorilla. More, is a really weird sort of run on. They stop on all fours. It's really odd.
But Celine did become one of the sort of early icons, didn't they, of the series? I mean, all the sort of merchandise and the exhibitions and stuff. Celine was very much a big deal. I mean, I know they come back for Sarah Jane and obviously come back for Boomtown, but it's in some ways it's slightly strange that it's not been more or another. I suppose another 100 audios of them. I don't know.
Well, who's to say we don't get them back? Of course, in the new Doctor Who.
What was Russ said to you, Jason?
No, I can't possibly disclose any details whatsoever.
He was down the bay having a cup of coffee.
James has more of an in at the BBC than I.
What? I know where the studio is, if that's what you mean.
Jason's personal friends with Russ. What are you talking about?
Oh, aye. Anyway, moving on.
So we have our first cliffhanger. So what do we think?
Because this not this is I don't. I mean, we've only done 3 videos prior to this on this season, but I know I talked about the next time thing. So maybe that was end of the.
Yeah.
Because this was the problematic episode where you get the triple cliffhanger, and the next time which tells you that all 3 people involved in these survive.
They all survive.
It doesn't work, does it? It's very jarring.
But I know they learn their lesson on it. They learn their lesson.
They learn quickly. I think as a cliffhanger, it's quite effective. They're all in peril. I think they sort of build up to that crescendo moment, but I think you're right. They immediately then play the next time clip, and it's like everybody survived.
I mean, I can understand wanting to try and experiment with these 2-part stories, because obviously I kind of like the single episode format. This does feel a little bit pulled out and a bit stretched to make it work in the 2. And I think you could have told this. I think the story could have been told in a 50-minute block just as well as I think it was in the two slots that it was given.
You know what? I'm going to disagree with you there, because I think if it had been condensed down to 50 minutes, you could have done the Slovene plot line. But you'd have had to have sacrificed the Rose family stuff. I think that the 2-part thing gives you enough time to be able to do the storyline that you would do in a 40, but add the impact that you've got to cover, rather than Rose just turning and going, "Hi, Mum," and she's like, "All right, you stop the night at Shreen's," or whatever. It's kind of, I think the 2-part allows you to just cover that stuff. I agree. If this was episode 3 or something, and they just landed back, and you were meant to believe she'd only been 12 hours away or something, you could quite easily bam do this through quite quickly. You could negate a few bits. The pig thing you could probably drop out. You could do it. You could do the storyline in a 50-minute. But I think to do the storyline as it stands and incorporate the family thing needs to be.
And I think you also get the reintroduction to Unit. So there are little bits where actually I think you probably would have lost had it been 1 episode. I think you've got the reintroduction of Unit. You've got Mickey.
Well, Unit isn't reintroduced though, is it? Quite. It's mentioned, but they're not. The soldiers around Downing Street and stuff aren't Unit, are they? There's just a couple of the experts.
Yeah, I mean he mentions working for them, but it's a sort of, again, it's that trickle effect, isn't it? Of I used to work with these people. Weirdly, Mickey's like turned into Clive. He's now like Mr. I know all about the Doctor. I know all his past, working for the government and stuff. But whereas we were talking on our last recording about how it was Dickens that saved the day, this time it's Mickey, who hacks into the Navy and uses the missile. I mean, yes, he is helped by the Doctor, but again, the Doctor and Rose are trapped. They're stuck inside the chamber in Downing Street, and they're having to rely on Mickey to do to essentially save them, weirdly by blowing them up, but save them.
Thank good for his quality dial-up internet connection. And isn't it funny how nothing dates faster than modern technology? Because when the doctor talks, he says, "Oh, I can't deal with listening about where you can get dodgy half-price top-up cards." It's like top-up cards for mobiles. It's. I know you can still pay as you go and all stuff like that, but when you used to have to scratch off and put the code in and all that, it's really weird that it seems like 100 years ago, but because they've all got little Nokia 3310s and stuff, and it's kind of like that's the connection, and it's amazing, isn't it, that these things suddenly become what was actually just everyday and marvelous. And I was thinking, oh crikey, they're a bit backward in 2005, weren't they? Top-up cards, bring them back.
But you do get to see that, a bit more of Mickey sort of development in the second part. Whereas the first part, it's all about what's happened with Rose and really the relationship between Rose and her mum. You get to see more about the Mickey development in the second part, and you get, as I said earlier on, you get that moment where Jackie is saying to the doctor, "Can you keep my daughter safe?" And there is that pause, and then Mickey says, "We're in and we're ready to go," and she just says, "Oh, you still haven't answered my question." And that will be a continuing theme for the rest of the series, is Jackie's feeling about the doctor and Rose being with the doctor, whereas kind of Mickey's moved on and is like, right, okay, I'm gonna help you, which results in him at the end saying, "Do you want to come with us?" But he says no. He just says, I don't want to be, I don't want that to be my life. And I think it's the first time you see that little chink in Eccleston's doctor, where he sort of puts a front up and says to Rose, "No, I'm not having him on board." Even though he has already offered him a place. So I think there's a nice little bit of a twist there.
But I mean, he has that sort of comes quite quickly off the back of his horrible manipulation of Rose. And when the phone goes with TARDIS calling as well, and she's just sort of made peace with her mum, and her mum's sort of coming round to the situation, and she just wants to meet him and cook him a shepherd's pie, and he's having none of it, and he instead of just saying, "I understand your situation," he tempts her with more things, and she just jumps for him.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of unpleasant. I mean, it's not a new character trait. I suppose you could say Seventh Doctor was very manipulative with sort of Ace and stuff like that. But it does almost highlight that kind of anti-hero sort of alienness, doesn't it, really? And he is using her, she's sort of using him. They're both being a little bit selfish, and but in a nice family way.
Yes.
Yes. So, do we have any exotic facts on Doctor Who and the aliens of London and the World War III?
There's a couple of things. So we get another sort of future Torchwood person. So we've got, is it Naoki Mori? I said that right?
But what is it? Not Naoko Mori?
That's the one. Yeah. Oh, it's not that far off.
I mean, if you watch Ab Fab, you call her Titicaca, and that's terrible because that's what Adina calls her. That's what Adina calls her in Ab Fab. Jason thinks I'm being racist now. If you've watched
it, whenever I see her,
I've forgotten that.
It's Titicaca.
It's Safi's friend Sarah, isn't it? She's called Sarah. And Adina always calls it Titicaca. So it's terrible because that is. I mean, it is racist. But anyway, I always think of her. I don't think of her as for Torchwood. I think of her for Ab Fab and the Spice World movie, where she's their friend who gets pregnant and can't be and isn't in the band. Well, sing your song, love, but you can't be in the band. You got pregnant. Anyway.
So a couple of other things. So you get Bad Wolf is graffitied on the side of the TARDIS in this episode. This one was you get to see the TARDIS key. Now the TARDIS key is now changed into like a Yale lock key, which it used to be prior to what you got, Pertwee. So it used to be like a Yale Key, and then it changed into a more alien key, but now it's gone back to being like a Yale Key, and you'll see it more later on in
the Yale Key again for Tom Baker, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm sure Peter Davison had a Yale Key as well.
But then Paul McGann has the spade key back again, doesn't he? From Pertwee, because they wanted the merch.
So you get that. The Doctor calls Ricky quite a lot, and then later on, in another season's time, we discover that Ricky is actually the name of his other universe alternative. But it's more of a standing joke in this series. And this was the episode where Russell T Davies decided to go back and retro add Bad Wolf, because this was the one that they had it prominently in, and so they went in and added into the previous episodes. And I think that is all I had that we haven't already talked about.
Was this episode, was Naoko More, was that not the first new recording on this first day's recording on the new series? Was that not in the hospital? Were those scenes not done first of all before anything else? I think was that the start.
Yeah, I think reference to this was one. I think wasn't this Eccleston's first filming as well? There was a scene.
It would have been the hospital stuff, wouldn't it? If they would have done first.
Yeah. Which we now know is Jason's GP surgery.
It is indeed my GP surgery. This is also, by the way, one interesting fact James missed out: the 700th episode of Doctor Who.
I have that. I've got that on my pad, but I thought
you might, but you missed it, and I just thought I'd better add it in there.
Which one's the 700th then? Is it Aliens of London or World War? Aliens of London.
Yeah.
Okay. You can read the Wikipedia screen very quickly, can Jason? but much like someone with a bad auto cue, he's still doing that.
Oh, it's okay. James writes them all down from the Wikipedia, though, so he's fine. He gets away with it.
It's when he scrolls down and goes, "Oh, it's a new TARDIS design." Jason, you're on the wrong page.
Oh, that's all lovely and friendly. I'm still haunted by it being Jason's surgery. The things they must have seen that are worse than a space pig.
The things you've seen. The big bad wolf.
Oh, for shame, it's not natural.
Oh, that's just getting restless.
No.
Behave.
Well, I have never heard the like.
And never will you again.
Oh, dear. Right. Well, anyway, I think we are not cruising. We are sliding towards a score for this. Which one wants to summarise and score first?
I'll go first. So yeah, I mean, I think as far as the first two parts, I think it does give you that proper cliffhanger ending. If you didn't have the next time immediately afterwards, I think it would have worked really well. And they did learn from that. I know a lot of people did complain. I think, yes, I can understand the farting aliens. I can see that they wanted something that was going to be accessible, but at the same time, I kind of wish the Slitheen were a little bit more ruthless and a little bit more, I think the fact that they can hide in human bodies, I think, is quite a grotesque and horror-filled thing, but they've made it more comedy. And I can understand that they've done that, but kind of wish that they hadn't. Yes, there'll be loads of kids with their zips, pulling it across their foreheads and everything, but an element missed for me. I love the family drama. I think Russell T Davies does that so well, just that, understanding what dynamics are going on and what emotions, and I think that bit plays out so much better for me than throwing a jar full of pickled eggs and gherkins at an alien and then it sort of explodes with green slime everywhere. That being said, it's not a terrible story. It just, I wish there was something a little bit more to the alien part of it, and as you say, I'm quite glad that we get a revisitation later on, because I think they are interesting characters. We don't really get a chance to develop them very much, other than I think obviously one goes off hunting on its own after Jackie, and you get that moment where they're sort of like saying, "Oh, one of them's been killed off." So they are a family unit in that respect. I scored this a 6.
I was going to say, actually, we didn't sort of say there is that funny thing that Doctor Who's like, "Oh, so you're the Slovene, are you?" And they're like, "That's our surname. We're not. That's not our race. We're blah blah blah." And I think that's quite a nice take on it, because you always have it, don't you? Like, we're the Dominators, or it's always the whole race rather than just a family from the planet. You know what I mean? That's quite a funny joke. Yes. Well, anyway, Jason, tell us about your surgery.
Well, I'm not going to mention the surgery, but I will do a quick summary. James covered it very well there. For me, I think the series at this stage is still finding its feet, and I rewatching it again, I've seen this one a couple of times, but it's not one I go back to, because it's 2 parts, and I kind of like my New Who sort of wrapped up in the sort of 45-minute section, because it's quite a quick watch and an easy watch. But this one isn't. It isn't as good as the stories, I think, that have preceded it. You're right. The family drama stuff is it's good, and it's adding that extra dimension. But I still think that the aliens are letting it down, because they're not farting jokes aside. You're right. There's no menace. There's no sort of real threat here. There is, but I find them just a little bit too cuddly, I think. But they're done better in other examples. I do feel, and I've listened, obviously, and P-Bal, you've said quite rightly, if we'd done it in one episode, you wouldn't have got that sort of drama for the sort of, the family dynamic stuff in there. But I do think it's probably just a little bit too long at 2. And I kind of would have liked to have seen it as a 1, but that's just me. You're right. Great guest cast. I think there is some great writing. There's some great comic writing in this one as well. But it's further establishing it. And I think, for me, the series kicks up a little bit of a gear over the next couple of episodes, more so than this. And I still think it's showing some of those early, not teething problems, but they're still trying to work the format out. And I think in this one, and in this sort of 2-parter, I think that still comes through. But all things being equal, it is a pretty good story. And with that, I should be scoring this a 6.5.
Sorry. And I hate to do this to you, Jason. You said that you think this isn't as good as the 3 stories that precede it. You scored it half a point more than you scored The End of the World. So I'm not sure that the facts bear up there.
Well, again, there are elements I like about this. There are elements I don't. I grade the story on how much I've enjoyed it as I watch it. End of the World, 6.5 will do for me.
I'm not. I just basically on literally what you said and what you scored. I'm not questioning your score, my love. Just saying.
Well, it's got a 6.5, so.
I know. I literally just said that, you mardy old cow. Honestly, you could see the handbag being pulled up from under that camera as we speak. Anyway, I would disagree about the monsters having earthing impact, because there's that lovely bit in the where Annette appears out of the darkness and they've just found the dead prime minister, and she's like, "Has someone been naughty?" And there's, I think the human versions of it portray a menace that switches on a pin, and I think they go from the guffawing and we've done a Trump to just that kind of the looks, and I think that they all handle that well, the shift. So I think that works well. I was surprised because in my head, I sort of thought before watching them that I knew where I would go to score them. And I think it's one of those things, I suppose, when you look at when they do those big polls on Doctor Who magazine, you have to rate all 200 stories out of 10 or whatever, and you just do it, go, oh, I think I like that one. I think that's it's so much different to actually just going through and watching them in sequence and scoring them like this. Because I naturally, from my memory, have thought I liked End of the World better than anything around it, and it's not been the case watching it. So anyway, I came out with a 7. That's 3.5 per episode. I've combined the scores up for us, which brings Doctor Who and the Aliens of London out on 19.5.
They're quite bunched together, aren't they? Some of these, they're quite. There's only like 3 points.
It's like a Strictly table. This is. They're all within a point to each other. Anyone could be in the dance-off here. Yeah, that puts Aliens of London. What's it, second from bottom? So I don't think it's going to win because there are 2 stories that got more points than it. So I don't think it actually can win.
We're going to a telephone vote next.
Oh, well, that'll be it. It'll win.
I think we could do it. If we did a telephone vote, it might be like Junior Eurovision. We won that on the telly vote. We won that. Came 5th with anyway.
Didn't France?
Never mind. France won, but we won the telly vote. If it had just been people phone voting, we would have won.
That's the opposite to the main Eurovision, wasn't it? Because we lost on the telephone one, but won on the.
Well, you say lost. I say Sam was robbed. Anyway. It's a different world. He's going to have a #1 album this week. It's fine. We can live with that. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now he's not going to say thank you for anything. He's in a right old moody.
No, I am saying thank you. I always allow James that first opportunity to say thank you at the end there. But thank you very much, everyone. Pleasure as always.
It's gonna unzip in a minute.
Yeah, just like this.
No, I have a fear in the surgery. It's the other zip that comes down and the same light comes out.
Behave.
It's the same light and something strange and green drops out as well. Anyway, thank you very much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and write comments below. I will see you all next.